2 to 1 on the flamboyant tip. I'll just toss that ham in the frying pan like Spam. Get done when I come and slam. Damn, I feel like the son of Sam.
Hello guys, welcome to Socialism in One Bunker with our hosts Johnson Pike, that would be moi, and Pierre Tru-Dank. As you guys know, Xexizy and Rebel Absurdity had a fucking spurtastic breakup on Twitter recently, and if you were following us, you know, you saw a little bit of the action that we had with Rebel Absurdity. So, Pierre, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty fucking awful, actually. This is fucking...
why is that?
This is just fucking stupid. It's fucking retarded.
I mean, like, yeah, there's a lot of stupid things going on. Let's go back and, like, let's talk about, like, what started all of this, because there was a lot going on before we did anything, before we touched Twitter. Like, I didn't even have a Twitter account before any of this happened, so if you can give us some background on this, that'd be cool.
So, essentially, it appears that Xexizy and Rebel fucking had, like, a little moment, a little split. I guess fucking Xexizy just basically was fucking, apparently he was just fucking wasted, and so he just fucking started yelling at Rebel Absurdity to, like, go kill himself and shit. And so basically that's sort of what the context is, and I'll leave links in the descriptions to see the sort of entire argument.
Yeah, it was kind of weird. Like, they were both drunk, right? If I remember correctly, or was it just?
It might have been just Ecstasy, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, was there any, like, actual context to this though? Like, any sort of tension that was built?
Apparently. So we all know Muke's fucking failure at the TRS debate.
Oh yeah, that's horrible. He basically conceded, you know, like, he killed 6 million Jews to, you know, implement communism, but that's besides the point.
No, I think he said, I'll kill 30 million people, but I won't kill 30 million Jews, and that was kind of a joke. But, yeah.
Anyways, let's go on.
Yeah, so, we have, basically, after that happened, I guess all of Leftypol pretty much turned on him. You know, a lot of it was just, you know, poking some fun there, but many just fucking outright just fucking left, or just sort of, like, ignored him. Basically made Xexizy a non-person. Like, Xexizy is basically the Trotsky here.
Yeah, and if you actually went onto Red Ice Radio, that's what they're called, right? The alt-right sort of website, Culture Conf, they actually had a entire podcast right after that debate, because they thought it was some sort of huge like, victory or something, when in reality Leftypol is just simply, like, this sort of smaller board on 8chan, right? Like, there isn't much of what is it, like, it's not like it's, like, gaining this huge traction anywhere. Reddit is still gonna, like, top us for a while when it comes to different sort of leftist communities, but when they were, like, hailing this as some sort of huge, like, success, you know, and, like, that they somehow, like, oh, we epically pwned these guys in the debate, and they were talking a lot about, like, not just us, but, like, the current state of the left. And so it's really interesting to think that these guys who only have, like, 1,000 subscribers each, right? Like, Xexizy only has, like, 2,000, maybe, I think.
I believe 2,000.
And then, like, Rebel has like around the same amount.
Yeah, he has 1,500, and Xexizy has about 1,600. So they're very close.
They're there. And the Leftypol community, I don't think that they fully encompass sort of like the YouTube wing of that. You know what I'm talking about? But
yeah. I mean, they really.
Connected.
Yeah. So, I mean, really, like, they aren't, I mean, I guess they live off their ego lives off of Leftypol, but I wouldn't say that they are really a big representation of Leftypol.
Yeah, I would totally agree on that. For example, you know, if you see their they're like clearly, obviously, just posting their new sort of episodes on Leftypol and stuff, you're gonna have people that are always gonna call them out for like trip bagging stuff like that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So it's not like everyone's on board with them, but they still have a huge sort of following on there, and it's just interesting to note that, right? Because at the end of the day, what we have is sort of like almost like a hierarchy, right, of idols that these people sort of worship, and on the top of it for a while was Xexizy until the actual debate happened. People were sort of mad at him because he didn't necessarily bring the best to the debate either. Like, if you remember,
he was awful.
there was some transhumanist dude.
Even his like he basically lost from the beginning of the people he chose to bring on. Obviously weren't probably the best.
It's really sad too because he didn't bring on the people from the last debate like Yui and stuff, where they totally destroyed the Center Right Federation. I think that's what they're called. But it's like an interesting sort of dynamic to look at in sort of the community, how it had its little sort of uphill battle with these entry level sort of anti-SJW YouTube channels out there, most of them like anarcho-capitalist channels. But inevitably, what we have here is was ultimately just a fallout at like the worst time too, right?
Yeah.
You know, like Rebel Absurdity was attacking Xexizy when he was drunk, and we really have to like push that in because he's a fucking snake at the end of the day when you look at this.
Yeah. I mean, and also, I mean, his behavior. I fucking made fun of Muke. I made a video making fun of him after the debate. Rebel Absurdity made Muke a non-person, essentially. And from what I know, I think Rebel and Xexizy were, at least, they were good friends. They talked in, like, the IRC and shit. I've been on Muke's show. I've talked to him and stuff, but not to the extent of Rebel.
Even at the end of the day, I don't think that we can put much on like Xexizy because I think he's a good guy at the He's made some decent videos in the past. He made like a huge video on sort of like I sort of disagree with it just because of my ideological leanings, but he made a decent video on like the different sorts of actually existent socialisms that happen throughout history that are of the Marxist variety. He's made some decent videos and like sort of formulations of how like his version of the vanguard would work and his theory of quote unquote libertarian Leninism. But you know, and if you compare that sort of content, which I don't think is like all that amazing, it's almost a little bit more genuine, I would say, than Rebel Absurdity's content, because Rebel takes a lot of interesting arguments and stuff, but it'll always be stuck in sort of the realm of theory. Like, have you ever read Frederick Jameson? Like, he's sort of a theorist of like the postmodern like capitalist theory, you know, of how like for example, like a lot of companies nowadays, they're just like sort of retreading the same products and giving it out to consumers and stuff. You know, he writes a lot about that. He wrote a little what was it? He wrote sort of a review of one of Zizek's books, and it was talking about how theory is always going to be the application of philosophy onto sort of practical things, but one thing that, for example, Zizek won't touch on is praxis, and I think that's one like really sort of important thing, because you take sort of this like philosophy, you translate it into theory, it inevitably comes out as a praxis, and that's something that you invent, like you would inevitably have with Xexizy that you don't have in Rebel, and at the end of the day, that's what's going to be important for the left. We've had years of theorizing. But in the recent years, we haven't had much praxis to like follow by. And I'm not trying to downplay a lot of like sort of the recent sort of movements that have like risen up, and a lot of the contributions that they've given, like the International Workers of the World, for example. They always work on things on sort of like the local levels.
Of course.
Yeah, and there's multiple different sort of like leftist groups out in the United States, in Europe, in all sorts of different places that are genuinely trying to make a difference. But online you almost have a lot of this sort of circle jerking of it's kind of larpy almost, you know.
Oh yeah,
And
of course, yeah.
yeah, at least with Xexizy you can see that he was trying to at least like sort of like talk about how like we can make it a little less larpy, you know.
Mhm.
I don't think he goes the full way, but he's going a little bit better, and I don't want the sort of what is it? I don't want like the dominoes to tip over back into Rebel absurdity. Where at the end of the day, we're just talking about like Lacan, and we're talking about how we can make different arguments against Mr. Epic alt-writer, you know?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
talk about like that's great and all, and it's actually like a lot of his videos are pretty decent when he talks about, for example, like a critique of Evola. That's
Mm.
fine for me, but
His critique of
you have to have balance of all these different things
yeah.
that are.
And his critique of Austrian economics was quite good as well.
I mean, I would obviously disagree.
Yeah, because yeah.
No, it was actually fine. Although the video that he was making the sort of like Austrian economics against were sort of like the ANCAP YouTube community, which is really brain dead. And I think we're gonna talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But do you want to like talk about what happened last night with Rebel?
Yeah, we should probably Rebel essentially so basically I made a little joke tweet when I was sort of just commenting on the thing. I can bring it up here. And that's essentially, I just say the champagne socialist and the dildo Leninist are fighting. My face when. And essentially I guess Rebel got very triggered by the word champagne socialist, and he took issue with it. Where you just simply asked you asked Rebel what's your job. He claims to come from a working class family, in which basically Rebel spurgs out, and I don't know how many tweets, but it's there's a lot of back and forth here.
Yeah, you made a joke about it. It's like, what is your job? 400 tweets later, it's all about the family material conditions.
Yeah.
Or whatever he was talking about. It was almost madness, right?
Yeah, but
he kept on talking about. Anyways, go on.
Yeah, there was just a large back and forth, just from a simple question, what is your job, about, essentially, like, he's explaining something about the family material conditions, which honestly,
I don't think exists outside of, like, maybe, like, hereditary debt, or, like growing up, like, extremely sort of, like, poor, but that doesn't really, put you necessarily in, like, for example, the working class, you know? That's why Marx always wrote about, like, the lumpen proletariat, for example. One of the biggest issues I had with all of this was he was essentially saying nothing within all these tweets that he was tweeting back at me. He made a little Lacan joke, too, and you could tell that, like, his understanding of Lacan was, like, off of, like, Zizek videos on YouTube. It wasn't really anything that was too complex, and so I even joked around with him, and I started like throwing Lacanian lingo, and he's just like, wow, that's a lot of words with no content. And I'm like, well, like, if you read Lacan, you'd realize that you're doing the exact same thing, you know? And it's just sort of interesting to think that someone would be throwing sort of insults at me, telling me to read Keynes and stuff to learn about class theory, when essentially, when he was saying that he was working class, he was using it in this sort of catchphrase way that, like, the media uses it.
Yeah, exactly.
And it has almost nothing to do with him identifying as a Marxist and me calling him out, like, in the same way that a lot of people in the past have with a lot of these quote-unquote Marxists who are really just champagne socialists.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day.
Yeah, and he made a good he said that like I kind of made a joke because he seemed to be implying that just because his family was working class, he was working class, which, you know, usually is true, but that's more out of like, okay, because you can't you know, there's not a lot of mobility to get higher. So I kind of made a joke that it sounds like he's thinking. Well, he made, like, he said it was something about, like, in terms of British terms. It's like, well, I wasn't aware Britain was a some sort of feudalist society here.
Yeah, and then I made the joke, like, okay, cool. If this is based off of heredity, and I guess I'm, like, the first individualist anarchist warlord because my original like Korean ancestors are like they were fucking warlords. So he wasn't making any substantial arguments. The whole thing was completely silly. He was ratting on for like at least 400 tweets. After a while, I just stopped talking to him because I kept on asking him, "What is your job?" And he wouldn't respond to that simple question.
Yeah, and I want to
make stupid memes about us.
Yeah, I want to specify, like, you know, we're not like some sort of like, oh, you know, you have to prove you're working class or something. Well, no, the reason why we're kind of asking this is because he does just give off. He does seem like a champagne socialist, especially when you consider like. So he obviously, I'm gonna guess he doesn't have a job because he dodged that question completely. So, but we know he's in university. At least he said that before. So I mean, I really don't know how it would be possible for someone from a working class family to go through university without a job.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be completely sort of like disingenuous and call out like. You know, use sort of this anecdotal evidence that we had with him straight up and just say, oh, you know, like he's just a middle class kid who's like at uni and, you know, he brings the Communist Manifesto into a Starbucks. Like, I don't want to give off that vibe. That's completely disingenuous. But what this does remind me a lot of is back in 1955, there's a guy by the name of Raymond Aron, and he wrote a book called The Opium of the Intellectuals, and he was trying to figure out sort of the French scene and how a lot of these philosophers were trying to use Marx to create sort of a new reign of political change, you know, in the university. And one thing he noticed a lot, you know, was that a lot of these university kids, they don't really have a connection to the working class. Marxism doesn't necessarily create a theory, or at least if it did, right, you know, like it wouldn't be contextual to the history right now, right? There's a lot of elements of Marx that have been falsified, right? Like, for example, in the Communist Manifesto, he talks about how the middle class will like sort of disappear and inevitably like the petty bourgeois will disappear. And then you'll have this ultimate sort of increase of the extraction of like surplus capital from the laborers until the laborers sort of rise up and take over the bourgeoisie. And that would make sense, you know, if you know that actually happened, which it's not happening right now. And it's kind of silly because he sort of takes that point and then like points out at people like Jean-Paul Sartre, you know, who's like using Nietzsche and like a Marx to create almost like this humanistic philosophy, and he's trying to say that a lot of these kids are using that plus a lot of sort of their energies at like their age and trying to create almost like they're trying to like pretend like there's some sort of like vanguard elite, and that's where you get with the May 1968 revolution, right, in France, where a lot of these kids actually overtook the Communist Party and scared the working class from actually revolting. And so what you had instead were all these like you know, like kids fighting for like these super progressive causes using like the revolution to overtake the government. They almost did too, by the way, which is really sort of astonishing. But they didn't have a plan the day after, right? You know, that's something that someone like Zizek will talk about, you know, like the day after they wake up and they realize that there's no government anymore, and they like
and that like
they don't have like a legal procession to actually like fill that in with, you know.
And also that the another point he made was like, oh, now that there's no God, how do we do burials and stuff, you know. But anyways, I want to get into more I think like really like Rebel's sort of general attitude, because many go after Xexizy for not reading enough, rightfully so. But a Rebel, I think we kind of saw a huge degree of pseudo-intellectualism from him here.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to harper in. Where like again, he's using this moniker of Jean-Paul Sartre, and ultimately like I don't think at the end of the day, you know, that Rebel is a like I don't think he's too serious about his sort of anti-capitalist sentiments. You know, Maybe he is, and maybe I'm completely misunderstanding him. But from the videos I've watched, a lot of them are more like, here's a couple of arguments you can use against alt-righters. Here's a couple of reasons why capitalism is bad, you know. But he doesn't ever have anything like to say really about praxis, in my opinion. And that's another thing I wanted to bring up, right? I'm hopefully you can put this in the links. You can put this link in the comment section or something. But I was reading a are you familiar with the Real Movement blog by Yahoo? He's like a Marxist blogger.
I'm not, no.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm not a Marxist, by the way. I'm an individualist anarchist of like sort of like the free market.
Yeah, C4SS.
Yeah. Like I'm not like one of those crazy ANCAPs that takes like the NAP, for example, in a vacuum, you know, and that's gonna talk about fucking campus code, like speech code, or the SJWs who like secretly feed the military industrial complex. That's almost absurd. But I do find a lot of like Marxism interesting, and ultimately some of it also had like almost you know, it intersects with a lot of the methods that I think are really interesting and really useful. And so I was reading Yahoo's sort of paper on why like a lot of these anti-police movements, you know, and like the Green Party, for example, they don't do enough. And I think he writes a lot about like what the left should be doing, you know. And let me try to find the quote. He says blah 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 blah. Now here is where it becomes difficult for a radical left's vision. As a practical matter, the police cannot simply be replaced from the top after election victory. They must be forcefully pushed out of the community. The community itself must decide where the police must go. No radical left party can do this for the community. It must be the community itself that arrives at this decision. This, in turn, requires a community that is organized to assume the functions of the police. To make an analogy, a capitalist-run factory cannot be converted into a cooperative unless the workers are already organized. The work of realizing a police-free society, completely unlike the work of electing a radical left party into office. You know, so I think Yahoo makes a really good point here, right? This doesn't just go to actually like just providing a praxis for those outside in the real world. This is also actually a really good praxis for people on Leftypol, for example. You know, we love to sort of idolize, and this is just sort of like what I see in the radical left in general. We love to idolize like sort of figureheads, right? Who doesn't love to idolize figureheads, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
But what are like the core values of the left? We post Stirner memes all the time, but Stirner's all about sort of a radical individualism, right? Making your own name for things, right? And we've basically are in sort of a rut right now, you know? Leftypol, they're just continually like spamming the same memes that we've had for, I don't know, like the past, like, I don't know, like years.
2 years, yeah, 2 years.
Yeah.
Well, Stirner came a little later, I think.
He came a lot like with lit and stuff.
Yeah,
but a lot of these like porky memes, for example, like they're almost gaining this toxic sort of image of what Leftypol is to people outside of Leftypol.
It's essentially like, becoming like it's becoming like a Jew.jpg meme, essentially. Like the
biggest issue is that like and if you saw like Xexizy's latest video, you know, this is the epitome of it. A lot of our critiques of the right are just like, haha, you guys are just like SJW, so we win. No, that's not what the right is necessarily saying. They're not. No one's critically thinking anymore. You know, we have to create new processes. We have to write new pieces, like think pieces about things. You know, and we have to be doing all these sort of newer. We have to be creating new content, basically. At the end of the day. Yeah. We can't talk about Posadas for like the 120th time, or you know, we can't like think of like the next, you know, we can't just say another anarcho Hoxaism joke or something and just talk about bunkers all the time. There's got to be something that's beyond that. And you know, that's one thing I liked about Leftypol. It was fresh at the time, but it's just slowly waning.
Yeah.
It's always the same threads on there every week, you know. We have to go beyond something. So it'd be interesting to see a lot of these people organized there. It'd be interesting to see a lot of new memes. be interesting to see any of your guys' efforts. You know, going outside, doing stuff. That'd be really fun. So
Yeah.
Do you have anything else to talk about?
I think we should probably go on to how like this sort of figurehead stuff is just toxic. Essentially, and I kind of like this. When Mew kind of had his little flop there, Leftypol was like, "Oh, we need Rebel Absurdity to be our like figurehead again." No, that's stupid.
Like,
that's
where do we see this? Where do we see this? We see this in the USSR, right? Like, we don't want history to repeat itself, right? That's why history is there. It's to learn off of our mistakes.
I mean, like, I really, I think both of these people, to use an analogy, they're essentially like, think of a, like a rich kid, or a kid from rich parents who essentially just goes around with his parents' money and does really stupid shit. That's essentially what these people are, because they just feed off, their ego sort of just feeds off Leftypol, and they just go around and do stupid bullshit. That, like, still, like, and then they, like, start, like, this, oh, I'm gonna get drunk and fucking argue and shit post on Twitter. It's something, Xexizy, Rebel kind of likes to do this. He does the whole trip fagging thing. I
mean, you did this for a while, but it'd be nice, like, that it's nice that we actually notice this now, so.
He would do this shit, like he would fucking get drunk and go and shit post on Leftypol. Xexizy, he's like, oh, notice how I'm drunk and not shit posting on Leftypol. But yeah, he sort of like just does this on Twitter. But I mean, essentially, if Leftypol wants to be taken somewhat seriously, having a figurehead like these fucking people is awful. That's the worst thing you could do. And I know, like, I'm becoming more or bigger in that Leftypol community. I don't really want to be a figurehead. I don't want to have like the to be like, oh, I'm the figurehead of this online community. No, I'd rather have Leftypol to just be that community, which is kind of why I've sort of stopped doing the trip fag stuff. And
this is also a good place to sort of explain why, for example, you speak to people that are like on the alt-right, for example. We can't be stuck in our little like hug box all the time. So
I mean, like it's like how you would see shit like like basically little like friend threads, like, oh, we're all like, it's just this little hug box where everyone is just trip fagging and like doing all this like, oh. All this like friend shit, and it's like this is dumb. At least the alt-right, you can give them. They have like the big heads are sort of not this one like little like conglomerate of just a bunch of like buddies who just go around and like fucking with their inflated egos around Leftypol and do stupid bullshit. At least they're kind of like, I don't know, fractured. But I guess they still offer.
They are, but at the same time, it's kind of like hard to sort of pinpoint that because the movement's a lot bigger, and the alt-right goal is just sort of, and I don't even want to just say like the alt-right, just like the far right in general, because I like a lot of the European far right. I don't think necessarily falls in the quote unquote alt-right moniker, but one thing that I think that we can learn, ultimately is. Don't stay in our hug boxes. At the same time, create sort of a unity, So we want multi-tendency, right? We want different ideas, always within sort of the leftist community. That's why you have me on, for example, on this show. Yeah. It's called Socialism in One Bunker. Like secretly, deep down, I'm cool with like socialism in this sort of non-status form, but I'm like, I don't think I would ever really call myself this.
It's free market anti-capitalism in one bunker now.
freed market anti-capitalism in one bunker. But and I think that'd be sort of interesting to see, like a lot of different ideas, a lot of sort of like decentralized communities working together. all sort of against different sorts of sorts of waves of movements, bads on the internet.
Yeah.
We have to really branch out of just making YouTube channels that want to debate with ANCAPs. We have to make a real sort of like movement. For example, we have to create some real critiques against the alt-right that aren't just, well, you guys are SJWs too. You guys aren't changing something. You guys aren't changing the conditions for the poor. Because at the end of the day, they don't care about that,
Yeah, exactly.
We need to create more convincing, sorts of pieces of propaganda. We need to really organize. So
I just want to say, like, the leftist community. I'm not saying like we should be like sectarian or anything. I'm just saying like less centralized to the point where it's like idol worshipping. It's more like sort of
idol worshipping isn't really a thing, and it's more like there's sort of like respected members in the community that know a lot, right? Like we want to put these people on merit based off of like their different sorts of arguments, based off of their effort. And there is a bit of that, and actually there's a lot of that in both Rebel and Xexizy, but it's crumbling, like when you start making vlogs about yourself and you start making videos that are like, all right, do something different, you guys are SJWs, like
exactly, it's lazy argumentation, and essentially it just becomes like inflated egos, and
and a lot of the thing we also have to do is we have to be a little bit more, and there's a sort of like a leaning sort of, what is it? There's a tendency for the left to sort of become toxic against anything that has like the word capitalism in it, for example, a lot of the quotes that you see, for example, on Leftypol that are like anti-Rothbardian are like based off of like Rothbard's like later years. And a lot of people don't actually acknowledge that, like, for example, like Rothbard actually had a lot of really cool leftist, like, sort of revolutionary potential in his earlier years. And it almost sort of like mirrored someone like Benjamin Tucker, or like the earlier anarchists.
Although Benjamin Tucker was like pro-capitalist in his early years and anti-capitalist.
Yeah. Benjamin Tucker was definitely more like a socialistic sort of mutualist back in the day. And a lot of these ideas are just really interesting. My friend Grayson English, he's sort of he himself is a fellow memer of our of the left. Or well, he doesn't really call himself a leftist, but he's one guy that sort of introduced me to a lot of this different thought, and it's really cool. Like he does a lot of stuff in real life, like there's a lot of articles about it. Like for example, back in 2013, he did sort of like a meet an anarchist day at OU, and he talked to a lot of people, about how like anarchism can really sort of like represent like this extreme libertarianism, and so there's almost like a place where I think we can find like a middle ground, for example, with like ANCAPs, but at the same time try to not become like an ANCAP, for example. Like I don't like ANCAPs, but I personally I consider them anarchists, and I think a lot of them can sort of go towards this more leftist position. It's just a lot of this sort of like later Rothbardian idealism that really sort of poisoned a lot of that like community. Like I don't think that like, for example, Rothbard like supporting Pat Buchanan to be president of the United States was a good idea. But there's a lot of like earlier sort of ANCAP ideas that are really interesting, for example.
So you're essentially saying like discussion should sort of leave, like we should venture out of Marx and maybe we could.
No, I mean I'm not just saying we should venture out of Marx. Marx is a very important writer. That's
I know.
But I'm trying to say that like we should venture out into people who don't know much about these ideologies. If you see these ANCAPs on YouTube and they make like, for example, the Naked Ape, he made a video against libertarian socialist rants on how libertarianism and communism was like an oxymoron. And like that was the dumbest video I've ever seen in my life.
It was stupid.
Yeah, but like if you can sort of I don't think that he has any tendencies for sort of like radicalism, but a lot of these radicals, like even in the alt-right, or well, not the alt-right, like the French New Right, for example, like the identitarian far-right movements in like France. There's a guy named Alain de Benoist, and he writes a lot of stuff against capitalism. You have that like Fasci Goys meme that's like, hey, you think there are valid criticisms of capitalism? Well, how come you own stuff?
Yeah,
like
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, like these people, they do share some of the sentiments that we share. We just need to sort of like lock into those sentiments and really not be hostile towards them, sort of reel them in. So
you're essentially saying like rather than being like spartastic against these people and being like really, really epic, you'd be more like engaging. And I think that's true. And I've gotten shit for like after the Xexizy debates, it was I was like trying to talk to like Vox Romani, who was the one who did it, just to understand his like just his ideas. And I was trying to be nice too. I was just trying to actually understand what his ideas were. And Leftypol like screenshotted those and were like, "Oh, look, fucking Pierre's a fascist now." Like, no.
No,
like, it's
no.
like just
and
because you're not yelling
like
at people, it's stupid. Yeah, it's toxic. It's fucking retarded.
It is. And it's not just that, right? I see a lot of like left academia. They become very sort of stigmatized against these sort of like right wing authors. One of my I was never like trained in like philosophy, history, or anything like that. But one of my sort of online teachers of this, I call him a mentor. He was sort of like he had some like neoconservative strands in him. He had some sort of like Italian nationalist strands in him. And he taught me a lot of philosophy, and he like forced me to read a lot of these right-wing authors. And I don't think that this is totally endemic in like the left, right? For example, like Rebel Absurdity, he made a couple of videos of like different sort of right-wing thinkers, and that's great. We should definitely be reading a little bit more of this stuff, looking into like a lot of the different ideas that they have. And Leftypol has been doing a good like job with that, I think, to an extent, where they're open with these ideas, unlike a lot of like the mainstream left. And I think we should just open that a little bit more into where we can have a dialogue with these people,
Yeah.
And not just like a debate, So
yeah. I think that's pretty good. Should we like close some closing statements?
Yeah, like I guess like you guys could like add me or Pierre on like Facebook, or like follow us on Twitter, or subscribe, all that good stuff. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, I'll just say now, although this is a Socialism in One Bunker, it's sort of a special edition. This isn't episode 1, so don't expect it to be regular at least from here on out. Eventually it'll become regular, but there's still going to be a more delay on Socialism in One Bunker for the reasons that I stated in my Q&A. Anyways, I think that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess like closing remarks. All you guys, I love you guys. Everyone who's watching this, even if you're not a leftist, I love you guys.
Bro, I got to maintain, 'cause a nigga like me is gonna take insane in the membrane, insane in the brain, insane in the membrane.